The auction yard smelled like dust and diesel. Cattle mooed in pens under the fading Montana sun, and the low hum of small-town chatter filled the space between the clang of gates and the sharp cries of bidding. Ethan Cole leaned on a fence post. Hat pulled low, hands deep in his worn jacket pockets. His boots were coated in dry mud. And his eyes, shadowed beneath the brim, gave nothing away. He didn't come for cattle. He never did. Not anymore. It was habit now, showing up at the Saturday auctions. Routine. The crowd didn't bother him. Most folks didn't know his name. And those who did had learned not to ask questions. They called him, the vet, in passing. Never sure if they meant veterinarian or veteran. He never corrected them. At the edge of the lot, near the holding pens, a separate cage sat under a canvas tarp. Not cattle, not horses, just a single crate. A German shepherd. Matted fur, heavy panting, muscles tensed like coiled wire. The sign taped to the side said, "Aggressive, unsuitable for adoption. Military background, PTSD, scheduled for euthanasia." Most people walked by without a second glance. Ethan didn't. He stopped. The dog was alert, but didn't snarl, didn't bark, just stared back at him with piercing amber eyes, wary but focused. His ears were cropped tight against his skull. One had a jagged scar down the middle. There was something familiar in the stillness. In the silence, a man in a stained vest noticed Ethan lingering. "Damn thing's a wreck," the man muttered. "Used to be AK-9. They said. Bounced around 3 shelters. No one wants a broken war dog. Can't be trusted. He bit a trainer last week." Ethan didn't respond. "Last shot today," the man added. "If he doesn't move, he's gone by Monday." The dog blinked slowly, head tilting just a fraction. Ethan caught it. A signal, maybe, or instinct, or recognition. He'd seen that look before. In the mirror, after nights when sleep wouldn't come and silence felt too loud. Ethan stepped closer to the cage. The dog didn't flinch. He crouched, resting his arms on his knees. They stared at each other for a long moment. Unmoving. "What's his name?" Ethan asked without looking up. The handler shrugged. "Doesn't answer to anything. Old records called him Ranger." "Ranger." Ethan exhaled quietly. "Figures." The bidding started inside the barn. He heard the auctioneer's voice rising in rhythm. The familiar cadence of numbers and paddles. But Ethan stayed where he was. The dog hadn't growled, hadn't bared his teeth. "Take him," the handler said, half laughing. "You'd be doing us a favor." "Hell, I'll let him go for 100. Ethan stood, reached into his wallet, pulled out 5 crisp 20s. He said nothing, just handed the bills over. By the time Ethan got back to his truck, Ranger was in the crate in the bed, watching the world pass behind them like a soldier on patrol. He hadn't barked once. The drive home was long and quiet. Down gravel roads lined with pine and empty sky. The late afternoon sun slid behind the mountains, casting orange streaks across the horizon. When they pulled up to the old farmhouse, Ethan opened the tailgate. The dog stared at him, unmoving. Ethan didn't coax, didn't clap or whistle, just waited. Eventually, Ranger jumped down, landing with a soft thud. He stood still for a second, sniffed the dry grass, and followed Ethan to the porch without a sound. The house was sparse. Wood floors, plain walls, no pictures. The furniture was functional. A fire crackled quietly in the stove. Ethan unlatched the screen door and held it open. Ranger paused. He looked up at Ethan, then crossed the threshold. No barking, no circling, no pacing. He lay down by the door, alert but calm, as if this had been his place all along. Ethan stood over him. "We'll figure it out," he muttered. Ranger blinked once. Slow. Not agreement, but maybe understanding. That night, Ethan sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee, the stars opening above him like old wounds. Inside, Ranger slept by the stove, curled but not tense, no longer pacing the walls of some invisible war. He had no papers, no vet records, no history that mattered, just a name, and eyes that had seen too much. Ethan understood, because once, not so long ago, he'd been the one caged, by memory, by pain, by silence. The world had called him many things. Hero, ghost, broken. He hadn't corrected 'em either. But now, in this quiet space between mountains and memory, maybe two forgotten warriors had just found something neither of them expected. A second chance. Ranger didn't trust the house. Not on the first day. Not on the second. Not even on the third. He stayed outside, lying under the porch like a shadow with a heartbeat. He didn't eat the food Ethan left in the metal bowl by the steps. He didn't drink the water. He didn't bark or growl. But his ears were always up. His eyes always watching. At night, he paced the gravel by the barn, circling, stopping, then circling again. When Ethan lit a fire or closed a door too loudly, Ranger flinched, just barely, but enough to notice. He wasn't afraid of the dark. He was afraid of memories. Ethan didn't say much, didn't call for him, didn't clap or whistle like a man hoping for a pet to come running. That wasn't the point. Instead, he worked. He mended fence posts, cleaned the gutters, tended to the horses and split firewood. Always within Ranger's sight, but never too close. It was a quiet invitation. No commands, no expectations, just presence. On the fourth day, the food bowl was empty in the morning. Ethan didn't comment, just filled it again. The first real moment came at dawn. Ethan was in the pasture, hauling a busted gate off its hinges, his breath rising in soft clouds. He didn't hear Ranger approach, just noticed a stillness nearby that hadn't been there before. He turned. The dog was sitting 10 feet away, tail low, head high, not moving toward him, but not hiding anymore. Ethan gave a slow nod and went back to work. Ranger stayed. By the end of the week, Ranger had begun to follow Ethan, never close, never right beside him, but always a few yards behind. When Ethan moved, Ranger moved. When he stopped, Ranger sat. It wasn't obedience. It was something older than that. Understanding. Shared silence. Each afternoon, Ethan would sit on the porch, coffee in hand, and watch the horizon change color. Ranger would lie nearby, never quite relaxed but no longer tense. His eyes always scanning the fields, as if standing guard out of habit. Once, a distant gunshot echoed from the hills, some hunter taking a late shot. Ranger shot to his feet, growled low, body stiff as iron. Ethan didn't move, didn't say a word, just let the moment pass. Eventually, Ranger lowered himself again, still watching, but calmer, a little more anchored. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday. The wind had picked up, rattling the tin roof, and Ethan was in the barn, checking ropes and tarps. He turned and saw Ranger just outside the door, coat damp, eyes fixed on him like he was waiting for something. Ethan opened the barn door wider and stepped back. Ranger hesitated, then walked in. No command, no leash, just trust, barely blooming, like a stubborn weed in frost. Ethan pointed to a dry patch of hay near the workbench. Ranger lay down. It wasn't much, but it was everything. Over the next week, their rhythm settled, not into routine, but into understanding. Ranger would eat now, slowly, cautiously, but willingly. He slept under the porch or in the barn, depending on the weather, and sometimes followed Ethan into the kitchen, though never far past the door. Ethan spoke rarely, but when he did, his voice was steady and low. "Let it go, soldier," he said once as they watched the sun set behind the ridgeline. "You're home now." Ranger didn't react, but he stayed closer that night. Sometimes Ethan would catch Ranger staring, not at him, but through him, eyes distant, body still, lost in whatever memory still clung to his bones. Ethan recognized it. He'd lived it. He didn't reach for him, didn't try to pet him or snap him out of it. He just sat nearby, let the silence speak. That was how trust grew between them. Not with treats, not with tricks, but with time, with shared space, with the knowledge that neither of them needed to be fixed, they just needed to be understood. Then came the day Ranger finally stepped through the front door on his own. Ethan was in the kitchen, washing up after breakfast. The door was cracked open, as it always was, in case Ranger wanted in. Ethan turned. The dog stood there. No hesitation this time. He crossed the threshold, walked slowly across the wooden floor, and lay down near the fireplace. He didn't explore, didn't sniff around. He just rested. And when Ethan sat down across from him, coffee in hand, they locked eyes. There was no tail wag, no dramatic moment, just two soldiers, finally off the battlefield, no longer guarding themselves from each other, no longer afraid of being seen. Later that night, thunder rolled over the hills. The wind howled. Ranger didn't flinch. He slept by the fire, chest rising and falling in a rhythm that matched the rain on the roof. Ethan sat nearby, his old dog tags resting on the table beside him, untouched for years. He reached down and placed them next to Ranger's new collar. Not a chain, not a leash, just a nameplate. Ranger, US K9 veteran. The tag caught the firelight for a moment. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "You're not mine," he said softly, "but I'm yours, if you want." Ranger didn't move, but somehow, in the flickering quiet, Ethan knew the answer. The sirens came first, wailing through the quiet morning like a scream that wouldn't end. Ethan was stacking feed bags in the truck when he heard them. Distant, but closing fast. He stood still, listening. Ranger, who'd been resting nearby, lifted his head sharply, ears rigid. Then the wind shifted. Smoke, thin, acrid, riding low through the air. Ethan didn't wait. He jumped into the cab and turned the key. Ranger leapt into the passenger seat before the engine finished turning over. They didn't need words. They never had. Flames clawed at the sky above the Animal Rescue Center on the edge of town, an old converted barn surrounded by dry brush. Volunteer cars lined the gravel road. But no one was in control. Shouts echoed over the roar of fire, and a wall of black smoke curled high into the morning sun. Ethan skidded the truck to a stop. Ranger was out before the door opened. People were panicking, pulling animals into trailers, slapping at flames with their jackets, screaming for someone to do something. A young woman stumbled out the front with a limp dog in her arms. "The back kennels," she cried. "2 puppies are still inside." Ethan's blood turned cold. Before he could respond, Ranger bolted, straight toward the flames. "No, Ranger," someone shouted. "Get that dog back." But he was already gone. No hesitation, no command, just instinct, duty, heart. Ethan didn't think. He ran around the side of the building, coughing through the thick smoke, squinting to see anything beyond the blur of orange and gray. Heat slammed into him like a wall. Sparks danced across his sleeves. He reached the side door. Locked. He slammed his shoulder into it once, twice. It gave on the third try with a splintering crack. Inside was chaos. Flames licked the rafters. Wood groaned. Metal creaked. But through the smoke, he saw movement. Ranger. The shepherd was dragging something small and wriggling by the scruff, one of the puppies. He dropped it near the door, turned back in without pause. Ethan grabbed the pup and backed out, thrusting it into the arms of a volunteer who came running. Then he turned back. Ranger. A flash of movement. The second puppy. Ranger had it. But just as he turned to run, a groan rippled through the frame of the barn. A wooden support beam, scorched and brittle, cracked in half above him. Ethan saw it fall in slow motion. No, the beam hit the ground with a thunderous crash, right where Ranger had been. Ethan was inside before anyone could stop him. He ducked under smoke, shoved debris aside, heart pounding in his throat. There, beneath a collapsed board, Ranger lay curled over the puppy, shielding it with his body. The beam hadn't crushed him, but pinned him. One leg twisted. Blood. "Hang on," Ethan muttered, dropping to his knees. He pushed, pulled. The wood wouldn't move. He looked into Ranger's eyes, glassy but focused, burning with pain and refusal. "I've got you," Ethan said through clenched teeth. He jammed his shoulder under the beam and heaved. Nothing. He tried again, and again. On the fourth try, it shifted just enough. Ranger pulled free with a limping scramble. The puppy still tucked gently under his chin. They staggered out of the smoke together, Ethan gripping Ranger's harness. Ranger gripping life itself. Cheers met him outside. But Ethan didn't hear them. He was on his knees, checking Ranger's leg, brushing ash from his fur, murmuring words no one else needed to understand. Ranger didn't whimper, didn't flinch. He just laid his head against Ethan's chest. At the vet clinic, they treated Ranger for a dislocated joint, minor burns, and smoke inhalation. "He's lucky," the vet said, shaking his head. "Damn lucky. That beam could have crushed him." Ethan nodded, voice rough. He wasn't protecting himself. No, the vet agreed. He was protecting the pup. He always does. The vet hesitated. He might limp for a while. Maybe longer. Ethan looked down at the resting shepherd beside him. If that's the price, he'll take it. Word spread fast. By evening, local news ran the story. Former military canine rescues 2 puppies from fire. Photos showed Ranger lying on a blanket, eyes alert, with one paw bandaged and the rescued puppies sleeping beside him. The town, once wary of the so-called damaged dog, now left flowers and thank you notes at the clinic. But Ranger didn't care about headlines. And neither did Ethan. That night, back at the farm, Ethan carried Ranger inside. He placed him gently by the fire. Fresh blanket under his frame. Water within reach. Ranger rested his head on his front paws. Ethan sat beside him. "You didn't wait for a command," he said softly. Ranger blinked once. Ethan gave a rare smile. "Didn't need one." Silence filled the room, but not the empty kind. The steady, grounding kind that comes after chaos, earned and deserved. Ranger looked up at him, eyes calm, and Ethan whispered, almost to himself, "You saved them." Ranger didn't react, but Ethan knew. He'd always been saving something. Even himself. The limp worsened. So did the coughing. At first, Ethan thought Ranger was just slow to recover. The burns had healed. The bruises faded. But something deeper lingered. His breathing grew labored. His steps less sure. Some mornings, he didn't rise until Ethan called gently from the porch. By the 3rd week, he collapsed beside the woodpile and didn't get back up. Ethan lifted him into the truck himself. Arms straining but steady. This wasn't just fatigue. Something was wrong. Dr. Emily Reyes ran the only vet clinic within 50 miles. She was smart, no nonsense, and respected by everyone in town. When she saw Ranger on the table, her face tightened. After blood work, X-rays, and hours of quiet pacing, she called Ethan into the back office. "It's his lungs," she said, scarring, progressive inflammation. From the fire, partly, but this didn't start last month. This has been building for years. Ethan frowned. What kind of exposure causes that? She hesitated, then pulled up a screen and turned it toward him. Military-grade chemical inhalants, used in some training simulations. Or worse, field tests. Not for animals. Never for animals. Ethan's jaw clenched. Ranger lay nearby, watching with dull but steady eyes. Emily knelt beside him and rubbed his ear. "He's not done fighting, but he's running out of time." Ethan didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat by the fire, Ranger curled beside him like always. But now Ethan was wide awake, sorting pieces of a puzzle he didn't know he was still holding. The behavior, the trauma, the scars. And now this. It didn't feel like just bad luck. It felt like betrayal. So he made a call. To Lucas Hale, a former communications tech from Ethan's unit, now living off-grid in Wyoming, where he rebuilt drones and cracked encrypted systems for fun. Lucas picked up on the second ring. "You sound like a man with a ghost on his back," Lucas said without hello. "I think my dog's been carrying mine," Ethan replied. 2 days later, Lucas pulled into Ethan's driveway in a beat-up van humming with antennas. They worked out of Ethan's barn, where Ranger lay wrapped in blankets, drifting in and out of sleep. Lucas tapped into military archives using a back door Ethan never wanted to know existed. They searched Ranger's real designation, K9 to 37G. Unit Echo 9. At first, they found the official records, deployment logs, mission tags, a brief statement that Ranger had been dishonorably discharged from active K9 service due to unstable behavior and failure to follow command. That didn't sit right. Lucas dug deeper. Encrypted emails, internal review files, a redacted report. Piece by piece, the truth unfolded. On a mission in Syria, ECH-09's team was ambushed. Smoke, confusion, miscommunication. The handler gave an order to hold position, but Ranger disobeyed. He ran into the chaos, tackled a hostile planting explosives, and led 2 wounded soldiers back to cover. He saved lives, but broke protocol. The handler blamed the dog. Said he panicked. Said he bit the wrong man. Ranger was flagged as defective. Untrainable. Ethan stared at the screen. This is why they dumped him. Worse. Lucas said grimly, "There's a memo here. Do not escalate. Transfer to civilian shelter under controlled narrative. Avoid liability." They buried him. Because he made them look bad. Ethan stood, fists clenched. He didn't fail them, he said. They failed him. Emily helped prepare the report. She verified the toxic exposure, matched it to Ranger's scarring, linked the respiratory decline to classified chemicals banned in civilian use. Together, they crafted a dossier, medical, technical, human. And then Ethan did something he never imagined doing again. He went public. The story broke first on a regional news blog. Then a national veterans advocacy site picked it up. Within 48 hours, headlines spread. Hero dog branded aggressive. Now dying from military cover-up. K9 silenced for saving lives. Inside the scandal no one wanted to talk about. Video clips of Ranger rescuing the puppies from the fire were paired with leaked documents from Lucas. Ethan refused interviews at first. But when the story hit cable news, he stepped forward. A live interview, 1 camera, 1 microphone, and Ranger at his side. Ethan's voice was calm, direct. He didn't need a command to save lives. He said, he didn't need permission to be brave. But when he needed help, when he needed justice, his country turned its back. He paused. "I'm not asking for medals. I'm asking for the truth. Because that's the least we owe the ones who gave everything and asked for nothing." The fallout was immediate. Congressional aides requested records. Military officials issued statements of concern and investigation. A petition with 1.2 million signatures demanded recognition for Ranger and a formal apology. Ethan didn't care about the politics. He cared that people were finally seeing what he had seen that first day at the auction: the intelligence, the restraint, the pain, the dignity. Ranger wasn't broken. He'd just been ignored. Until now. That night, as the story dominated the headlines, Ethan sat quietly in Ranger's room. The shepherd lay curled on his blanket, breathing slow but steady, eyes closed, body still. Ethan reached out and rested a hand on his back. "You didn't ask for any of this," he murmured, "but you earned it." Ranger stirred slightly, nudging Ethan's hand once with his nose. Then went still again. The next morning, letters arrived. From soldiers Ranger had saved. From handlers who'd known him. From kids who watched his story on TV and drew pictures of the brave dog with the hurt leg. Ethan posted one of them on the wall. "Dear Ranger, thank you for being brave. When I'm scared, I think of you. Love. Ben, age 7. Ethan smiled through the tightness in his chest. The truth was out. And now, finally, so was Ranger. No one could explain how Ranger survived. Not fully. After weeks of oxygen therapy, antibiotics, and slow healing, the vets had warned Ethan to prepare for the end. But Ranger had other plans. Day by day, he clawed his way back, through shallow breaths and sleepless nights. Until the coughing eased, the appetite returned, and the fire came back into his eyes. Not the fire of combat. The fire of purpose. The story of his survival, paired with the exposé, the rescue, the betrayal, and the outpouring of support, spread across the country like wildfire. Talk shows picked it up. Veteran groups hailed him. A congressional committee opened an inquiry into canine training programs. But Ethan ignored the noise. He stayed home, with Ranger, because something bigger had already begun. The first dog arrived 3 months later. A Belgian Malinois named Tank, retired early after explosive detection duty overseas. High drive, no family, labeled unmanageable. Ethan didn't see a problem. Then came Bella, a chocolate lab with hearing damage from too many detonations. Then Ghost, a nervous Doberman who hadn't wagged his tail in over a year. They came, one by one. Some stayed for weeks, others, for good. Ethan built kennels, one at a time, then a training yard, then an on-site vet cabin. Emily offered to volunteer. Lucas helped install camera systems and sensors. Donations poured in from across the country, money, supplies, notes of encouragement. And with every brick and beam, the farm changed. It stopped being a quiet place for a broken man and his broken dog. It became Ranger's refuge, a center for the forgotten, the overlooked, the dogs who gave everything and were given up when they weren't useful anymore. Ranger, now slower and grayer, remained the soul of it all. He no longer ran. But he didn't need to. The younger dogs watched him with reverence. He would sit in the sun, eyes half closed, and they would gather near, drawn not by command, but by presence. He had nothing left to prove, but everything left to give. One spring morning, a yellow school bus pulled up to the edge of the dirt road. Doors creaked open. A group of third graders filed out. Eyes wide, voices hushed by the size of the land and the quiet majesty of the animals around them. Emily greeted them near the barn. "This place is special," she explained, kneeling to speak at their level. "Every dog you'll meet here was once a soldier. They've served, suffered, and survived." The children nodded solemnly, clutching notebooks and coloring pages. Then Ethan stepped out from the main house. And behind him, Ranger. The old shepherd moved slowly now. His right leg stiff, his body bearing the wear of battles seen and unseen. His coat was thinner, his eyes softer, but when he stepped into the center of the yard, the entire group fell silent. Ranger stopped, sat, watched, the same way he had on day one. A little girl stepped forward. Brown pigtails, pink shoes, a drawing in her hand. She knelt beside him, cautious but unafraid. Ranger didn't move. She reached out, pressed her fingers gently against the patch of fur over his heart. Then looked up at Ethan. "Is he the one from the video?" Ethan nodded. "He is." She looked back at Ranger. Then slowly, reverently, held up the picture. A crayon sketch, crooked and colorful, of a big dog standing in front of flames. Two puppies behind him. Tears welled in Ethan's eyes before he could stop them. The girl leaned in, her voice a whisper. "He's not just a dog. He's a soldier." Ranger blinked, and lowered his head until it gently touched her shoulder. That night, as stars blanketed the Montana sky, Ethan sat on the porch like he always did. Ranger was beside him, head resting against Ethan's boot. Across the pasture, lights glowed softly from the kennels. Wind chimes stirred in the breeze. Somewhere, a young shepherd barked once and then fell quiet again. The farm was no longer silent. It was alive, with purpose, with healing, with second chances. Ethan reached down and stroked the fur behind Ranger's ear. "You did good," he murmured. Ranger didn't stir, didn't need to. They had both found something the war never gave them: peace. And in the distance, more paw prints would follow in his.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.